So the next item that we have on our agenda is the Farmworker OS project proposal. So we did obviously have at our last meeting some initial conversations around this proposal. Jorge and Jesus did present this to us as they at the last meeting. There were a few discussion points that we had. The code of conduct, the plan there is to use the OWF's code of conduct that is specified in the actual pull request itself. I think the reason it hasn't changed in the pull request is because we asked for the current code of conduct, not what code of conduct is going to be used. So we just might want to update our template to kind of reflect that information around both current and planned code of conduct. The license we talked about is going to be changed or has already been changed to Apache 2. And then the last item that was at least currently on the pull request was around project governance. So there is in the pull request itself quite a bit of information on the underlying, let's see if I can find where it's at, the proposed project governance around who currently does what within the Farmworker Wallet OS project. There was some commentary that I had made around, should we have information about looking for additional contributors and maintainers, and Jorge did point out to me that I was maybe asking for a bit more than I should be with the lab stage. And so I just wanted to make sure that this kind of discussion would be brought up here, just to make sure that everybody was aware of kind of what is documented in the proposal around the governance practice. So yeah, I think that's the at least the open items that were addressed in the pull request. I guess now is a time for us to have further conversation about this particular pull request. So Troy, maybe I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. I believe last call I'd also mentioned the fairly generic repository names in some cases, examples being demo native template, demo dev native app. Since this project might end up being somewhat specific to Mendex and possibly Aries, we probably should have less generic names for repositories, as generic names could cause confusion for visitors and conflict with other projects. So that's kind of one top level comment. Since we don't have project names, how do we plan to deal with this at OWF? Second comment was some commentary maybe on what is the interoperable roadmap for this project in terms of protocols and credential formats. I can make assumptions from reading the proposal in that it's discussing trust over IP and DIDCOM and Aries things. So, is there plans for OIDC? Or sorry, OID for VC? Is this a non-creds versus verifiable credentials in its different flavors, right? So just, is there a roadmap for that, or does this project plan to be fairly specific to the use case, which actually relates to the last comment a little bit? And then the final one was the proposal is discussing hosting what looks to be Hyperledger Aries specific repositories. So maybe some commentary on why isn't that proposed at Hyperledger, and what is the implications for hosting Aries specific stuff at OWF, if any. So that's kind of the discussion topics I would highlight.
Okay. Shall we, how did I change the page? Shall we start at the top here then with the repo names and see if there's been any thoughts on that, Jorge, since the last meeting?
Yeah, I can address that. So the repo names in the Actually, I'm just going to share my screen so that
Yeah, let me
folks can
stop
follow
sharing
along.
and you can do that. Okay, good. It took over.
Oh. So this diagram was just kind of it was built to help just the average user. Not everybody on the call is technical. So what I was trying to illustrate here is that there's in addition to the actual model that we're contributing behind the wallet engine, right? That's going to be the key driver of the wallet engine. There's some additional repos that include like a demo app that we run in Mendix. Show you in the IDE. I'm running it now, and from my phone, I could basically the native template you use to develop a distribution, a mobile app distribution, right? And that distribution, you have to have a distribution channel to the device, right? So we use a third-party provider to help us streamline getting mobile distributions installed on mobile devices, but you can certainly use the app stores, Google Play Store or Apple App Store, right? And that what I mean by demo app is this is the app that's installed on the device. And so I call it demo because this wouldn't be something that we would provide for the users of this code. You would have to use the native template to create your own build, and then use your own pipeline to the distribution channel. So I can show you what it looks like on my phone, right? I have an app. I call it currently Aries SDK, but Aries SDK, there was another comment about references to the other Hyperledger project. And so I just thought of a more generic name here, demo dev native app. That's really what I mean, is this distribution that the native template, which would also be another repo that would be part of this project contributed to the OpenWallet Foundation, would allow any developer who pulls this code to easily build the native distribution that you can install on a device, on a supported device. So that's why it's generically named demo, but it could be called whatever the developer wants to call it.
Yeah, I think the question is more around, should we name all of the repos that we would create within the OpenWallet Foundation organization with the same prefix, right? Such that we would understand that these are all part of the Farmworker OS lab, right? So, do we prefix these? If we put Farmworker dash in front of all of these different boxes, does that solve the problem?
Yeah.
And Troy, I think it's a good sort of question, right? Around how do we make sure that we are separating these such that people can find all of the projects or all of the repos related to a particular project, right? And you're exactly right, Troy. In Hyperledger, we do tend to prefix them with the project name. And for labs, we prefix them with the lab name. So this is probably a similar sort of thing that we would want to do here within the OpenWallet Foundation.
Yeah, exactly, Tracy. That was the gist of that first comment.
And I suppose, Jorge, there's no restrictions as far as from the Mendix side and from what you are creating, if we do something like that, where all of the repos are prefixed with a particular tag, so that we understand they all go to the same project.
I don't. There's no technical issue. No.
Okay.
We can name these repos whatever we want. So yeah,
Okay.
I imagine that once this thing is formalized, hopefully, that we'll just align to whatever naming standards, whenever naming conventions, guidelines are provided by the OWS.
Okay. Let's see, the second one is around interoperable credentials and protocol roadmaps.
Yeah.
Are we only looking at a non-creds and DIDCOM, or are we thinking that this will expand in the future?
It was certainly going to expand. The great thing about us piggybacking off the Aries frameworks is that the Aries communities are very proactive in getting support for some of the other emerging standards. OpenID for VCI and OpenID for VC presentation are on the roadmap for Aries framework JavaScript. There's already even a working prototype of the passwordless login use case that one of the main contributors of the Aries framework JavaScript team recently published a working example of that. And so we are certainly planning on incorporating those features as soon as they become available. We're already upgraded. We're on the latest version of Aries framework JavaScript, which is 0.40. So we've been able to get that into this framework over the last couple of weeks. So we're pretty up to date with the latest revision of the framework. And I would add that we're also adding some support to complete the trust triangle, right? For the issuer verifier side of the requirements for a developer to be able to support. If they're building wallets, that's great. But if they're also building verification apps or issuer apps, then we started doing some work on that front as well. And we've got a bit of work I can actually show you. So currently running a Aries Cloud Agent Python locally on my environment. And this is an example of the administration API, the Swagger that you get out of the box when you configure and you run your Aries Cloud Agent Python. Well, now in this app, we have a front end to that API. So effectively, you can see here that it's online, it's checking the liveness, and we have, let's see, I can pull the configuration of my particular agent, and I can actually invoke certain operations remotely, like, offering a connection invitation, things like that. So this has just started, but we realized that in order to test interoperability and full end-to-end, that we're gonna have to figure out a way to make it easy for Mendix developers to be able to run a complete end-to-end test harness. And so this framework would have then allow the Mendix developers to build issuer verification flows into their apps, in addition to the DIDCOM flows that we had already kind of presented last week.
And Jorge, on that last point, would the expectation be that would be a second proposal to the OWF, or it would be part of the Farmworker OS lab work that you would do, or?
Yeah, all the framework stuff that's being built on top of we are adamant followers and of the Aries community, right? And so that's kind of like what thanks to the great work and the great investment from multiple parties over the last few years on that framework, we believe that it's our best path forward. And so we're doing our part to make those components easily adaptable, pluggable for our ecosystem, right? Our tech stack is Mendix. And so anything that we're working on that is the basis for the foundational trust, digital trust exchange, credential exchange, DIDCOM, W3VC, all that stuff that we're building would be within the scope of this project, right? Not the not the custom implementations on top of that, right? And like that's what this diagram is there's a separation, but like the basic core functionality, the core wallet engine, which would include the integration to an Aries Cloud agent, that would be included. So the reason why I didn't update in the diagram is that this is hot off the press, right? We just started working on this over the last few days.
Troy, did that help answer the interoperable roadmap question that you had?
Yeah, I mean, if I summarize, if I understand right, it's basically kind of flexible to whatever the farm worker projects kind of need. If that's the summary.
Yeah, absolutely. And because, we're hoping that there are other developers that are incentivized and motivated to join this particular project, that's where, we'll get faster time to market with some of these other capabilities. We're a small team. We don't have the capacity to do all this. There's a lot under the hood. And, we feel like getting the sponsorship of the OpenWallet Foundation would bring in other developers. Collectively, we can make this happen a lot faster than just Entidad working on this.
Is that here?
Tracy, yeah, I didn't join from the beginning, so I might have missed something that's already been covered, and I apologize in advance for that. Yeah, so just on Jorge's last comment, so does that mean though that moving forward, the underlying kind of Mendix no-code, low-code platform is sort of becomes part of any implementation that anybody chooses to pick up in terms of this thing, Jorge, that you're talking about, i.e. is what you're talking about tethered in some way, shape, or form to the use of Mendix as the low-code, no-code developer platform?
Yeah. This particular project is specifically aligned to a stack, right? So Mendix is that stack. And so if you're not building apps on Mendix, if you're not a Mendix subscriber, then you wouldn't be able to leverage this code. So
okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everyone's clear on that point. I wasn't, but I am now.
Yeah, just like there are, wallet engine frameworks in JavaScript and Python and Go, .NET, right? This one's in Mendix, and so it makes it easy for developers already in the Mendix ecosystem to start to get their feet wet with Web3 digital trust technologies in the stack that they're comfortable with. But if you're not a Mendix subscriber, if you're not a Mendix developer, then you wouldn't be able to use this code.
And in this context, Jorge, Mendix is as you say, you need to be a subscriber, so it's a corporate commercial entity, and you have to have licenses to Mendix, right? It's not open source. It's not
Correct.
an open source framework. Is that a fair comment?
That's a fair statement. Yeah, but the way I see it, it's no different than having a code repository and going to running your DevOps pipeline to deploy that code in EC2 in AWS or in Azure, right? You have to pay somebody to run that stuff for you, unless you're going to buy your own hardware. Or even the mobile apps, right? You got to have an actively licensed Apple developer account and an actively licensed Google developer account in order to publish any mobile app to those stores. Those are commercial providers as well. That's the analogy I'd like to make.
Okay. And then the last question or comment from Troy around the providing commentary on the relationship to Hyperledger and implications for hosting area-specific projects at the OpenWallet Foundation.
Yeah. My attempt here with this box here labeled open source software dependencies was to illustrate the dependencies on other open source packages that a developer would need to be able to import into their environment in order for this functionality to actually work, right? So it's not intended to suggest that we're hosting copies of these repos, right? These are active developer communities, the Hyperledger community, the Mendix community, and the React Native community that are proactively building stuff that we can take advantage of because of the stack, right? So in the mobile, if you're going to build mobile apps, native apps in Mendix, that translates to React Native. And so there are React Native and NPM packages that are made available by third-party developers in an open source capacity that you would have to bring in. And so that's what I was trying to illustrate here, is that these are actual packages hosted over in the Hyperledger GitHub account that need to be brought in as their dependencies in React Native. And so in order for you to build your own app, your own distribution, these dependencies have to be available. And so that's what I was trying to illustrate here with these lines here. They're just dependencies to other open source packages.
Yeah, Troy?
Yeah, sorry. I'll be maybe a little bit more specific. I was looking at actually Aries SDK Mendix and Aries Test Harness Mendix, and the question that comes into my mind is, and I assume that could be a question we'll get going forward, is why aren't those projects at Hyperledger, since they seem to be area specific? And then the kind of larger question is, what is OWF's relationship maybe to Hyperledger Aries, and how do folks decide if they're going to put a project over at Hyperledger or OWF? So that's kind of maybe the larger discussion topic about that.
Yeah, I can tell you that I know that there's been active conversations between the two organizations, and we've been following that. One of the things that, for our stakeholders and just the marketing around wallet development, right? The OpenWallet Foundation and its core mission is a lot more intuitive to our stakeholders and the target audience that we're trying to reach. And so that's why we started by first proposing this project with the OpenWallet Foundation. We had anticipated, having to make a decision, right, depending on if the Aries community was willing to move over or not. But we think that coming in through the OpenWallet Foundation, it seems to be more open. People tend to understand the wallet concept better than Hyperledger, which is more of a blockchain type of technology that is not necessarily a requirement for being successful in building these types of apps. And so that was the primary motivation. We wanted to give the OpenWallet Foundation, or we want to take our first shot at proposing this project to the OpenWallet Foundation.
Yeah, so just to follow up, I guess I'm just curious about these very specific repos, and maybe the implications, and maybe that's a discussion for everybody, right? Just we will have these repositories that are basically saying, here's an Aries component, but we are now hosting these new Aries components, like Aries SDK Mendix at OWF instead of Hyperledger. So Tracy, is just, are there any implications to that? And what's kind of the future of OWF versus Aries? And it's really these very specific repos that are basically Aries repos, but at OWF, right?
Yeah. So I guess a couple thoughts from my side about what I've heard. And so this is speaking, I guess, with both my OpenWallet Foundation hat and my Hyperledger hat on. So there has been, as Jorge mentioned, some discussions about does Aries come to the OpenWallet Foundation, or do some pieces of Aries come to the OpenWallet Foundation? I think at this point, the Aries community is fairly happy, at least the majority are fairly happy staying in Hyperledger. And so I think that is, at least in the foreseeable future, the direction that the Aries community is taking. I see that, with these two particular repos, there is obviously the dependency that exists with Aries framework JavaScript that exists in Hyperledger, and its life cycle and the progress that's being made there obviously is something that these particular repos will have to ensure that they keep up with, right? So for example, updating to the 0.4.0 release, which was just released, is a good sign, right? That there is intention to maintain, compatibility with the latest version of Aries framework JavaScript. But I do see that is, a potential question and concern for the future, right? Is to make sure that continues to happen with this project and its forward movement. And I think as we look at the OpenWallet Foundation lifecycle, with this being in labs currently, the part of moving to the growth stage would be, what is that roadmap look like for ensuring the compatibility with versions within the Aries community and the changes there, and making sure that there is that communication. I think that is the key between the Hyperledger Aries community and the OpenWallet Foundation, is making sure that there's open lines of communication so that we understand what's happening where, and so that there can be that cross-pollination and the collaboration that needs to exist to ensure that both communities, right, are successful in their movement forward. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts on kind of this Aries, I don't want to say versus OWF, because I think that sounds a bit adversarial, and I think it's more Aries plus OWF, and how they work together is really the way we should be looking at this. So other thoughts, I'm glad to hear those, or opinions on what Troy is trying to bring to light here, because I think it's an important thing to bring to light, Troy.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. And I think we'll have that going forward as well, that there's from the sounds of it, that Aries is staying in Hyperledger. So we'll have these interesting conversations about the overlap and going forward, right? And things that are more common libraries and things that are kind of Aries specific, and what does that mean? So I guess more discussions to come.
Yeah, I do see this as bringing potentially another set of people to the Aries community, right? Specifically Mendex developers. And, I would say that's a benefit for what's going on at Aries, because the more people you have using it, hopefully the quicker it can progress and support some of these, emerging standards and credential formats and things like that. So, I guess my thought is that I don't see this as necessarily a bad thing for folks involved. I think this is only going to help people on both sides of the different projects. So that's my initial thought. I guess we'll see how it works out, if that's the case or not. But that's kind of where I'm leading.
If need be, I guess there'd be no reason why we couldn't move or actually create the Aries SDK Mendix repo directly in the Hyperledger, right? So that way all of the different implementations are together, but we would just have to have, I guess for the developer, the Mendix developer, it wouldn't make a big difference, because at the end of the day, where you're pulling this stuff from is from the Mendix marketplace. So as developer, you go into your studio and you go into the not able to connect, but yeah, basically you do a search on components. So someone would do a search on Aries wallet, and it'll pull it into your project. Where it lives doesn't actually matter now that much. So maybe we split the code bases depending on where they're best aligned.
Sure, do you think
that SDK on its own, you can't deploy a fully functional wallet, right? That's the key here, is that it's the rest of the stuff that's going to be added, the key management, the trust registry, right? All of the other stuff, components that are still yet to be defined. That's really the core engine that I see that is really the value proposition for the OpenWallet Foundation in the context of this project.
Yeah, Tracy, I think you're mentioning me. Yeah. I'm quite torn about this issue, right? Because the trouble is, or not the trouble, but Aries itself ends up having a lot of, even common libraries that aren't really specific to Aries. I've traditionally looked at Aries as like, DIDCOM plus protocol implementations, but some of the projects have, extremely, let's call it common libraries that probably would fit better at OWF than being tied into Aries, right? So I actually think this topic goes both ways, right? Some things should actually be at OWF, like the common protocol implementations, the common credential format implementations, right? So it actually goes both ways for me. I think some things should actually be at OWF, is my personal opinion, but it's just, if something's like a wrapper of an Aries project, and that's what its purpose is, like perhaps Aries SDK Mendix, then people would probably be looking over there for that stuff, if it's literally a wrapper of another project, right? So that's my rough thing. I actually think some things should be, personally I think would live better at OWF, but things like wrappers probably go with their parent projects. So that's my rough guidance or thoughts or opinions.
Okay, so just looking at the time, we have 4 minutes left. I'm wondering where we move from here. Does it make sense to think about whether Aries SDK Mendix goes with the Aries community? Does it make sense for us to think about accepting the project as is? Does where does the TAC want to head with this at this moment?
Tracy, my view, this is so here. My view, I probably wouldn't have said it as eloquently and clearly and crisply as Troy, but my view is similar to his, where, I think we have to be clear on, what layers or elements of the kind of the OpenWallet stack, we want to be opinionated or not, as the case may be. And my feeling is also, like Troy's, it's something that he called a wrapper, that is specific to another project like Aries. I would have thought that it really comes down to where is OWF going to be and need to be opinionated, and where does it not? And I would have thought that something that is because let's just say I'm a bank and I want to stand up a wallet solution, and my low code no code platform in my bank is Appian. It's not Mendix. What then? I don't want to change that. Then I can't use what OWF is providing just because I've chosen another commercial wrapper. That would be my thoughts as well.
I also tend to agree with that take. Especially for large institutions and enterprises, it would get very difficult to potentially even consider onboarding a new vendor. It might make it impossible. So I think it just becomes less compatible and interoperable with other existing solutions, which makes it challenging.
All right, thanks, Jorge. Thanks, Pete. So I think then, sounds like maybe we're not quite ready for a vote yet. But Jorge, I think there's some things we can do if you would like to, approach Hyperledger. I think obviously the labs process there, I can help you through. And then we can also start to have some of those conversations with Aries community to figure out how we get it the wrapper part of Aries instead of just as a lab. Let's continue this conversation, I think is the thing. I think there are still some pieces that we do want to consider for the OpenWallet Foundation. And so maybe it's a matter of drawing that up and seeing which pieces are the pieces that make sense to go into Hyperledger, which pieces are the right places to go into the OpenWallet Foundation. And then hopefully that will resolve some of the concerns that have been brought up. But I'm happy to work with you on that, Jorge, and work through kind of that process.
Sure. We've already presented previously to the Aries Framework JavaScript team, the developers in that community.
Okay.
And there was positive support. I didn't hear any objections. Been trying to coordinate with the Aries, the overarching Aries community. They have weekly calls. Unfortunately, it overlaps with this call, so
yes.
I haven't been able to jump on that one.
Okay. So then let's do that. We'll work on that as we move forward, and we'll see what we bring back to the next TAC meeting on this about kind of the results of the conversations that we've had there. All right, so I think with that, I'm gonna close out today's meeting. Obviously, we have another meeting in 2 weeks. For those of you who are looking to put your name in for the vice chair, deadline is again August 2nd. So please do get your proposals in there, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.